Hello everyone, it is Dr. Julie Anné from A New Beginning in Scottsdale, Arizona. Thank you so much for tuning into this next segment of Not Your Typical Eating Disorder Recovery Tips, where we work on identifying and working through the underlying issues that give rise to your eating disorder behavior so that you can have full and lasting change. In today's episode, Messages to My Dieting Self, we are going to work to understand how messages that you received in your early formative years get internalized and become your core belief system about yourself, which you then carry forward into your adult life and which inadvertently get activated when you put yourself on a diet. Now, to understand this, I'm going to quickly review concepts that I go over in many of my educational videos, and it really is the key to my work with clients at A New Beginning. So we all take in key messages during our formative years, and especially from our early attachment figures. A lot of times these messages are not ill-natured, they are not meant to hurt us, but they are delivered in such a way that it lands on our particular personality. And if you are somebody that struggles with overeating behavior, binge eating disorder, we know that your temperament is very likely what we call highly sensitive. So what does that mean? That means that you experience things that people say or the world around you in a very sensitive manner. I'm not saying that in a way that is negative towards you whatsoever. Being a highly sensitive is actually a really beautiful thing. You experience things very deeply, very fully. Your heart is usually a very loving and giving and feeling heart. But what that also means is that when things are said like, do you think those pants look a little tight on you? Or do you think you should be getting that second helping of food? That it lands on you in a really deep, riveting, hurtful, and sometimes shameful manner that you store within yourself. And oftentimes don't share with others. So it just becomes this sense of deep hurt, wound, and oftentimes shame. Now, in addition to taking in messages from early primary caregivers that might have been painful and caused a wound, I'm going to introduce another concept that I talk about quite often in my work. And that is the concept that while we take in these messages as a child and internalize them to form core beliefs and a sense of ourself, what happens when we grow up chronologically is we actually then step into the role of the psychological parent to ourselves. Now, what does that mean? That means that as we become an adult, the messages that we give to ourselves actually then land on that sensitive part of ourself. And oftentimes we describe that as the little girl or the little boy inside. Oftentimes that was wounded by those earlier first experiences and then get inadvertently re-wounded, guess what? By you as the adult that unfortunately is repeating these dynamics. So we're going to remember this really important concept as we talk about 3 key messages you give to your dieting self that end up not only hurting you, but it ends up reactivating old messages from the past, kind of in this synergistic way. You're giving yourself unhealthy messages in the present, it joins with the unhealthy messages from the past, and it becomes this synergistic, just negative message to yourself, which oftentimes drives you back to food as a way to comfort yourself. So the first message that you end up giving to your dieting self is best illustrated by thinking back to the very first time that you were put on a diet. And if you are like the clients that come into a new beginning that struggle with emotional eating or binge eating disorder, it's probably about 100% of you that's watching this video, because those are the statistics, believe it or not, that we find in our clientele that come in for binge eating disorder, that they were placed on a diet at really early, tender ages, many times dating back to age 6, 7, 8. We hear stories all the time of going and being brought to Weight Watchers, mom or dad saying that you need to be put on a diet, and it's just heartbreaking. So when a young child is told by a person that's important to you that you need to go on a diet, you need to change what you are eating because your body is unacceptable and needs to change, what that really young mind and that really young psyche takes in is the message that I am not okay. There is something wrong with me. That message becomes a core belief about yourself, and not that it's not bad enough to have around your body self, but it ends up generalizing to other aspects of you that then feel every moment of every day, something's wrong with me, I am not okay the way I am. So if you look at it this way, when you, in your adulthood, place yourself on a diet, what you're doing is you're giving that tender, wounded, young part of yourself that has already been traumatized by these early experiences of being placed on a diet when you were super young, and you're doing the same thing to that part of yourself, which says, you're not all right. There's something wrong with you, okay? And that's what you end up then feeling as you walk around through your day. And we can only withstand that feeling for so long before it escalates and we reach for something that's going to comfort us. Most of the time, that's going to be overeating, binge eating, right? And then you're going to blame yourself and say, see, this is proof something's wrong with me. The next message that you end up giving to that wounded part of yourself when you put yourself on a diet as an adult is that you can't have this even though everybody else can. So let's look at this. If you were placed on a diet when you were a child, that child just looks around and everyone else is able to have birthday cake. Everyone else is able to have pizza at the pizza party. Other people in the family are having a second helping of dinner. But you are being told you can't have this. Okay? So again, we take in these messages when we are a young child through our young cognitions, through our young psyche. And what that says to a child is, I can't have, and children say, guess what? That makes me really want. And they are going to try to find any way that they can then sneak that food, or when they're over at a friend's house sleeping over for dinner, they're going to overeat. They are going to go to school and they are going to exchange their apple for somebody else's cookie, or they're going to bring money for the vending machine. And they, and likely you, are then going to overeat, because that message is you can't have. Then that natural rebellious part of you says, yes, I can, and I'm going to find a way that I can have it. No one's going to tell me that I can't. And it creates this dynamic, certainly around food, where I want, and don't tell me that I can't. That is really problematic when you try to, in a healthy way, regulate your food intake, okay? And guess what? It generalizes to other areas of your life. It might be, don't tell me that I can't have that excessive alcohol. Don't tell me that I can't have this item that I am shopping for on the internet, right? Because that child part of you that is now being told I can't, it goes back to your early history when you were told you can't have this food like everybody else, okay? And it activates it and it makes it want to have more, okay? So when you give yourself the message as an adult, you're going on a diet, whatever that diet is, you're being restricted, you're being told you can't, everyone else can, but you can't. Subconsciously what that does is it makes you want it even more. And it sets up this dynamic where it makes it really tough to self-regulate in a healthy way in the area of food, but also in other areas as well. Spending, drinking, maybe doing high-risk behaviors. Okay, so as an adult, we need to give that child part of yourself a healthier message than you're going on yet another diet. The last message that you give to your dieting self is a really hard one. Not that the rest of them weren't hard, but this is one that is particularly painful, and I think you'll probably agree. So oftentimes when you are placed on a diet by a caregiver that has a belief system that somehow your body shape or weight or size equals to your being acceptable or sometimes worthwhile in the eyes of others, the message that gets received as a young child is, if you are overweight, you are going to have a harder time making friends. If you are overweight, you might not get married. If you are overweight, you might not get that job, or you might not get accepted into medical school. Okay? These are specific statements that oftentimes get reported to me and my team at A New Beginning when we go into the history. And what that translates into is a core belief that that young child takes in that says, I am not lovable unless my body is a certain size, or I'm not worthwhile or worthy if my body is not a certain size. So when you are an adult and you tell yourself, oh my gosh, before we go on this vacation and you're going to be in a bikini, or you're going to start looking for a job and you need to lose weight, you're giving that young, wounded part of yourself the very same message, which is, you are not worthwhile in the body that you're in. You are not lovable, or people are not going to love you if your body weight is not at what you deem an acceptable level. So guess what? You tend to then remove yourself from those situations. I'm not going to go to that party on Friday night. I'm not going to try for that promotion at work. And you tend to then retreat, both physically away from people and then emotionally into yourself. Oftentimes that retreating and that isolation feels very, very barren, and you need to comfort yourself with something, and guess what? You end up reaching for that half gallon of ice cream and using that to comfort you because you're not allowing yourself to step out into the world because you think that you are not lovable or you're not acceptable the way that you are. So we have just come face to face with the hard emotional realities of what ends up inadvertently happening when you as an adult place yourself on a diet. You end up unknowingly giving yourself really hard negative messages that trickle down to that part of yourself that received really hard, difficult messages as a child. And they join together and they end up making you feel really bad about yourself again as an adult. And guess what? That likely drives and compulses you towards food, where you end up overeating, emotional eating, binge eating, and then asking yourself why. So, what I'm going to ask you to do is to really think about this. No, actually, I'm going to ask you to really feel about this. I want you to start being aware that when you place these restrictions on yourself, when you tell yourself that you need to change your behaviors because you think you need to change your body or that you're not acceptable the way that you are, I want you to recognize that you are giving these really hurtful, actually harmful messages to that wounded part of yourself. And then I want you to ask yourself, is that okay? And if it's not, I want you to think about approaching yourself in a different way. Supporting yourself not through negatives, not through telling yourself that you need to do something like go on a diet to be acceptable. But if you want to change your behaviors, I would like to propose that you approach that in loving self-support directed towards maybe goals of feeling better, physically being able to do more things that you really want to do, or just developing more trust within yourself to follow through on behaviors that you're hoping to change, okay? As opposed to repeating and reactivating and re-wounding those tender parts of yourself that really deserve instead to be embraced and supported. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Not Your Typical Eating Disorder Tips. I am Dr. Julie T. Anné. I am a licensed clinical psychologist. I am an eating disorder specialist practicing for 27 years. I am the owner of A New Beginning. I am also very honored to be on the faculty of Mayo Clinic Medical School in Scottsdale, Arizona, where I am a guest lecturer and consultant in the area of eating disorders. I love being able to provide education via this YouTube channel to help you to understand the underlying issues that are giving rise to your disordered behavior with food so that you can begin to love yourself healthy. If you've enjoyed this episode, please do like it, share it, give us a good shout out and a positive comment so that other people know that the video is worthwhile. We're really working on increasing our subscribers and our visibility. So that would be very appreciated. Thank you so very much. Work hard, love yourself, and embrace yourself healthy. Bye now.